by some notable players in this one. Just to touch on fantasy really quick, I would avoid A.J. Dillon in this. The Titans have a really good defense against the run. If he does get any points, it's going to come off a touchdown. And I think those are going to mostly come through the air from Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Jones is a much better play, obviously, given his receiving abilities. Glockness, I appreciate you joining the space. Anytime you want to jump in and speak, let me know. Would love to have you join the conversation. Adam, loving what you're bringing to the conversation. Blease, appreciate you. Everyone that's in Twitter space, thank you for joining us. Follow us on Twitter at Sports Fumble. And for all of us who want to get all of our content, go to at Buttfumble Sports on TikTok, at Buttfumble Sports on Instagram, and of course, subscribe to our page and our channel on YouTube. We put out a lot of content throughout the week, fantasy, gambling, stats, rants, everything you need to know about the world of sports, and especially about the NFL. We're going to move to the Sunday 1 p.m. window. The 6-3 New York Jets coming off a bye week play the 5-4 Patriots, who are also coming off a bye week. This game is on CBS. Where I see it, the Patriots are a 3-point favorite. The over-under set at 38.5 points. Some gambling trends for you before we go around and break it down. The Jets are 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 road games. The Patriots are 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 games overall. The favorite is 4-0 against the spread in the last 4 meetings between the Jets and Patriots. The under is 4-0 in the Jets' last 4 games overall, and the under is 9-4 in the last 13 meetings between the Jets and Patriots. Adam, what are your thoughts on Jets-Pats?
I was looking at the numbers in this game. It opened at -4 and quickly went to -3. Over-under went down a half point, but just the averages of yards, rushing, defense, these teams are just so even when you look up and down the board. I mean, it even came down to rushing yards per game defense. The last 3 games, each team, the Jets are 124 and New England's allowing 122. They're just so even across the board. Their defense allows 19.6 for the Jets, 18.4 for New England. The only big difference that I saw in this game was the rushing yards per game. The last 3, New England's been down from 117 to 89. That's really the only big difference I've seen. Otherwise, these teams are very even up and down the board. And I think, New England at home, -3. I think I lean towards New England this one. The Jets obviously came off that big win against Buffalo, and obviously that can go a long way. But up and down the board, these teams are so evenly that I think I would lean towards New England in this game.
If you talk about teams being even in a game that features the New England Patriots, historically we've given the edge to the New England Patriots because they have the hooded one, Bill Belichick. So if you say the teams are equal on paper and the rosters are pretty comparable, then we've traditionally given that advantage to Bill Belichick. But maybe something is changing in the AFC East because Robert Saleh is proving something week in, week out with this New York Jets team. Now, obviously, he has a much more talented roster than the Jets have had in years past, than he's had with the Jets in years past. But this guy was a really talented defensive coordinator and defensive coach when he was with San Francisco. We've been waiting to see his fingerprints on this team beyond the traditional bumbling Jets that existed even before him. When Zach Wilson doesn't turn over the ball, this is a really good football team. They play a disciplined, physical style that is similar to a Ravens or a Patriots or a Steelers. They're just very gritty. They're physical. They're north-south in their run game. And it's all, to me, about Zach Wilson. And the problem is Zach Wilson against Bill Belichick is a disaster of a matchup for the New York Jets. Zach Wilson historically has been bad against Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick against sophomore quarterbacks historically, it's a slaughter. So this being in Foxborough, and given that it's Bill Belichick, I'm going to lean New England on the money line. But when it comes to the spread, I'm going to buy that 1.5. I'm going to take the Jets plus 4.5. There's just a lot of indications that this team is talented enough. I actually think the bye week was really good for them. It refocused them. The Jets have been through a bit of a roller coaster. They were on a high when it came to their record going into their home game against the Patriots. This is the year they're going to finally upset the Pats and get that monkey off their back. They don't do it. They lose in a kind of embarrassing loss. They come back the next week and then beat the Buffalo Bills in a shocker, and all of a sudden everything's right again. They're emerging in the AFC East. The narrative completely flipped. They get a bye week, and I think that allows Robert Saleh to refocus the team, reload when it comes to the health of his players, and obviously prepare for a Patriots team that isn't that good. Mac Jones, he hasn't made the step forward this year that he should have. Ramondre Stevenson is a stud. But other than that, the offense isn't good, and the defense puts up a lot of points or a lot of fantasy points, a lot of stats against some pretty bad offenses. But against talented teams, the Patriots defense hasn't been that spectacular. So there's a lot of reasons for me to believe in the Jets covering. So I like Jets plus 4.5. I like New England on the money line. As for the over-under, I lean towards the under. The trends I mentioned earlier, they kind of play to that note. The under 4-0 in the Jets' last 4 games overall, and the under 9-4 in the last 13 meetings between the two teams. I do think this is a game between Mac Jones and injury-prone Zach Wilson. You feel like the running games are going to dominate. So for that reason, I do lean towards the under in this game. Adam, I do have a question for you. Garrett Wilson has clearly emerged as the number one target for Zach Wilson and the Jets. But given that he's going up against Bill Belichick, who usually takes away the number one weapon of an opposing team, do you think Garrett Wilson is a good play in fantasy this week?
Well, I'm not a huge fantasy guy. I'll just say that up front right away. I'm not a huge fantasy guy, but I think being the number one option, yes, I think that he's probably going to have a decent game. As far as all the fantasy points go, I can't really speak to that, but I would agree. I think he'll be okay this week.
One note that I'm making, Jacoby Myers, I would stay away from him. Devontae Parker, I potentially stay away from him as well, because it's a question of which wide receiver for the Patriots. It goes against Sauce Gardner, who right now is emerging as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, even in his rookie year. So if you're looking towards the Patriots side for fantasy points, look towards that backfield. Ramondre Stevenson, I think he's a good flex play this week. Given the Jets I think they're 7th in fantasy against running backs. They're pretty tough up front, Quinnen Williams. But I do think Ramondre Stevenson will be a focal point of the offense. Think he'll get around 75 rushing yards, maybe a touchdown. So I think he's a solid play. But wide receivers in this game might be worth fading. Going to the next game in the 1 p.m. window on Sunday, the 3-7 Chicago Bears play the 4-6 Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are a 3-point favorite where I see it, and the over-under is 50 points. Some gambling trends for you. The Bears are 4-0-1 against the spread in their last 5 games following an against the spread loss. The Falcons are 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 home games. The underdog is 4-0 against the spread in the last 4 meetings between the two teams. The under is 5-1 in the last 6 meetings between the Bears and Falcons in Atlanta. And the over is 4-0 in the Bears' last 4 games overall. This is obviously a game that features Justin Fields, and his superstardom continues to just rise. Everyone's been impressed in the last few weeks. That said, Atlanta, known for a very bad passing defense, do we finally see Justin Fields have a great game through the air? Adam, I leave it to you. What are your thoughts on Bears and Falcons?
So both teams coming off of tough losses. Chicago, obviously, against Detroit, and Atlanta on Thursday night against Carolina. So both these teams, running teams. Chicago is obviously first in the league, 210 a game. Atlanta's fourth at 160.4 per game. The stat that shows to me is, yes, Atlanta's pass defense is really bad, and I don't really think Fields is going to kill you through the air, but obviously on the ground he has been. And the one stat that jumped off the page at me was the rushing yards per game on both sides of the ball. Chicago's last 3 has given up 124, which is actually better. They're giving up 142 average of the year, but they've actually cut that down the last 3 to 124 a game. On the other side, Atlanta's actually gotten worse. They were 119 a game, and now they're 164 the last 3. So Chicago last 3, 250 yards a game. I think Chicago is just going to keep pounding this football here, and I think Field is going to be elusive enough against Atlanta inside the dome, so the weather won't be a problem. And I like Chicago in this game, plus the 3. I think Chicago is probably the better team here. that loss to Carolina last week and that Thursday night, I think was pretty brutal for Atlanta. I like Arthur Smith. I think he's doing a great job with them this year. I just think this Atlanta defense is so poor that they're gonna have a hard time stopping the Chicago running game.
Two trends that stood out to me, and I mentioned them a moment ago. The Falcons are 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 home games, and the underdog is 4-0 against the spread in the last 4 meetings between the two teams. The Falcons early in the year were a cover darling. They were a great story for bettors, and they were competing for the division when the Tampa Bay Bucks were slipping on banana peels. That's no longer the case because the Falcons are making mistakes of their own. I'm with you, Adam. I thought that was a devastating loss for Atlanta last week against the Panthers. That was a game that if they won, everything was possible, but with a loss, everything kind of disappeared overnight. They fall back behind the Buccaneers, and now there's a question if they'll ever be able to catch Tom Brady in the race for the playoffs again this year. That said, Justin Fields, as I mentioned, he is just emerging as a very special player, and the Bears are riding this wave of emotions. It's unfortunate because the last 2 games in which we've seen Justin Fields be so good, the Bears are 0-2. So it's hard for me on one hand to go, wow, I can so believe in the Bears given all of the hype when they haven't covered against teams that they, a Dolphins team and a Lions team when the Bears were at home. That said, I do think this is going to be a fast track for Justin Fields. I like that this is inside the dome, as you mentioned, Adam. No worries about turf, no worries about weather. So this is going to be a fast game. I like David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert, the running game of the Bears. It doesn't matter who has the ball. They are eating up yardage left and right. It's a really talented team. Cole Kmet, he had a massive game last week. Look for him to continue to build that chemistry with Justin Fields. I'm always a big believer in a young quarterback in their tight end, building that chemistry. You see it so often. I also like Darnell Mooney. I mentioned the Falcons give up the most passing yards of any defense in the NFL, 280 per game. So the Falcons defense is simply a mess, and the Bears are a better team as of right now. I lean towards, like you, the Bears, but on the cover. When it comes to the money line, I'm still kind of up in the air. I could absolutely see Marcus Mariota pulling this out, but I say that, and he really has been trending down. I think I'm giving too much credence to Marcus Mariota based off of what he did in the first month of the year. So I lean towards the Bears on the cover. I'm going to do what we always do here at Butt Fumble Sports because we love cashing tickets, and I'm going to buy that 1.5. I'll take Bears plus 4.5. As for the over-under, I have to believe in the over simply because there is so many big play opportunities in this game, given the defenses. I think that's where I'm kind of leaning. Adam, do you see it the same way? Are you thinking the over on that total?
I do. I look at this game kind of like that Chicago-Detroit game last week. I had the under 49.5 in that game, and it was looking pretty good, 10-10 at halftime, but it just lit up in the second half. And I absolutely agree with you that there's some big play potential here, even though it's on the ground, and that 50.5 could go pretty quick. So just because what I saw in Detroit and Chicago in a cold Soldier Field, I think it absolutely could get there in the Dome in Atlanta.
One note that I'm definitely bringing up in every conversation around the Atlanta Falcons, if Marcus Mariota does struggle, when does Ritter start to emerge as an option? They drafted this quarterback out of Cincinnati, who I think has a lot of potential. We haven't seen anything from him this year. When do they make that move? We've already seen Tennessee make a move. We've obviously we've been waiting. We've seen Pittsburgh make their move. So we're kind of waiting to see if the Atlanta Falcons finally let their rookie on the field. If Marcus Mariota has another disappointing game or even disappointing half, we may see a quarterback change in Atlanta. It's one of the reasons I don't know about the money line, because when you have jobs on the line, things change. But when there's talent on the field, you got to feel good about the cover, especially when that talent is on the underdog. Adam, since I know you're not a fantasy guy, I'll bring it up in this way. When it comes to looking at Kyle Pitts, can we look and expect a disappointing performance from Kyle Pitts, or can we expect a better performance from Kyle Pitts than what we've seen in the past few months?
Well, I think I like Kyle Pitts. And, Chicago is 10th in the league against the pass, but I think he is the confidence that Mariota has in him. So I like his stability that's there, and I think if they use him a little bit more, I mean, he's obviously a great talent, He's a big physical receiver or tight end, whichever one you want to call him. He's been struggling here as of late. Last 2 games, 2 catches in each game, basically for 28 yards. And then against Carolina, he had a little bit bigger game of 5 catches for 80 yards. But I think in this game here, I think you have to try to get him the football because he is such a game changer. But the last couple of games hasn't shown much for that. But I think if you involve him in the game plan, Arthur Smith's not an idiot, right? I think you can involve him in the game plan here. So I would look to have Pitts in this game, probably maybe 4 to 5 receptions.
I'm a big fan of Kyle Pitts. I really want to see him succeed. I thought he was one of the most talented tight ends I've ever seen at the college level. I have big expectations, big hopes. It's one of the reasons I'd like to see Ritter get involved, get someone with a better passing game, getting the ball to Kyle Pitts. Appreciate everyone who's joining us on Twitter Space. Appreciate everyone joining us on YouTube as we stream live. And obviously, I appreciate everyone who subscribes us to our channel on YouTube, follows us on TikTok at ButtFumble Sports, at ButtFumble Sports on Instagram, and at SportsFumble on Twitter. To the next game in the 1 p.m. window, the 3-6 Cleveland Browns against the 6-3 Buffalo Bills. This game is on CBS. Where I see it, the Buffalo Bills are a 9.5-point favorite. We do have some updated lines, despite graphics behind me. The over-under has changed due to a major weather system that is moving through Buffalo. There's expected to be snow. So the over-under has been moved down and is right now where I see it at 43.5, expecting a lot of weather, wind, and that has changed the over-under for that game. So expecting it to be a much lower scoring game than we had previously expected. That said, looking at some of the gambling trends before we go around and break it down, the Browns are 4-9 against the spread in their last 13 versus the AFC. The Bills are 10-2-2 against the spread in their last 14 games versus a team with a losing record. The favorite is 5-0 against the spread in the last 6 meetings between the Browns and Bills. The under is 5-2 in the last 7 meetings between the two teams, and the under is 6-1 in the Bills' last 7 games overall. Adam, what are your thoughts on Browns-Bills?
Yeah, like you mentioned, huge drop in that over-under from where it opened from 47.5 down to 43 with the weather coming through, like you said. Open at 8.5 down to 8. Cleveland's defense is just so poor. They're 31st in the league at giving up points at 26.4. That's a lot of points. But on the other side of the coin, the last 3 games, Buffalo's been giving up 23.3. So both defenses have been giving up some points in this game. The rush yards per game for Buffalo, I mentioned it last week with Dalvin Cook play that I had. There's their 7th average, but the last 3, they give up 176.3 points a game. So that speaks to a lot of Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the backfield for Cleveland to try to keep the ball away from Josh Allen. It's really hard to say offensively. It's just Allen and Diggs and the boys are just so impressive. I mean, they got that ball back with 30 seconds left, came right down the field to score to tie that game, to put it in overtime. If you saw what Miami did against Cleveland's defense, I mean, I can't imagine Buffalo wouldn't do the same. And laying anything more than 7, this year is really tough in the NFL. I could very easily see them covering this -8. I guess I really look to see what the weather system is going to be come Sunday, because the over-under might creep back up if it's a little bit better. But I think Buffalo can do the same thing here that Miami did to Cleveland. So I would definitely lean towards the over and see where this line goes with Buffalo to cover this line.
Weather is the ultimate factor we're going to run into in the next few months when it comes to betting. It changes everything, especially what kind of weather. As we've learned from storm systems past, sometimes you get big snowstorms, and that actually helps the offense. I go back to many years ago when the New England Patriots played the Tennessee Titans in the snow, and Tom Brady set a record for the most passing touchdowns in the first half. And he was caught on NFL films because he was mic'd up saying, "I love when there's snow. It means that the pass rushers can't get to the quarterback. They're finally the same speed that I am." That said, I wonder how this game is going to be impacted by weather, because this isn't just a snowstorm. This is a lot of wind. And I'm always worried about that Buffalo stadium and the wind. That stadium seems to trap wind, and it swirls around. It's not just a straight wind. It's a swirling wind. So I expect this to be a heavy run game for both teams. Adam, you mentioned it. First of all, credit to Adam. He absolutely nailed that pick for Dalvin Cook for all of those who are out there, follow Adam. He does great work. He's got great insight, and he's making great picks, especially his player props, absolutely nailing them. That said, that Dalvin Cook pick was outstanding because he looked at a trend that was far more recent. He wasn't just looking at the overall season stats, which is where sometimes you can get caught up and miss some of those opportunities. So the Buffalo Bills struggling of late against the run. Obviously, they're facing arguably the best running attack in the NFL, at least a top 3 running game with Chubb and Hunt. I love Nick Chubb in this game. I think he's going to be featured frequently. Because of the weather, I fade a lot of the receivers in this game. I just feel like this is going to be a heavy run game. I like Devin Singletary. I think he could have a good game. But for all those reasons and more, I want to take Cleveland to cover. I'm going to buy the 1.5, as Butt Fumble Sports always does, to try to raise the ceiling on my opportunity, try and cash that ticket. But that said, you're giving me a lot of points in a questionable game, a lot of variables. And as we've seen, Monday Night Football was an example of it. There have been plenty throughout the year. These big spreads just don't cover for the favorite. The underdog seems to be doing better and better in these games. And more often than not, they're within a few points or they're the money line winner in the end. So I like Cleveland to cover. On the over-under, Vegas is telling me something. They dropped 4 points from this total. They're telling me they're expecting for this to be a crazy game. I'm leaning towards the under right now. I also go towards two trends. The under is 5-2 in the last 7 meetings between the two teams, and the under is 6-1 in the Bills' last 7 games overall. So Vegas has been setting these lines right. They've been baiting bettors into taking these overs, expecting, with the Bills obviously being a loaded offense. And that said, the under has come up better than not. So I'm leaning towards the under in this one. I'll see how the public money comes in. I'm kind of hoping the public money drives this price up, gets it back up to 44.5, 45. I'd feel wonderful about it. But now that the word's out about the weather, curious to see how it goes. I'll definitely kind of play against the public money. So if the public money drives this down, I would consider the over. But as for right now, in this early betting window, I would absolutely look towards taking the under. As we move on to the next game, the Washington Commanders play the Houston Texans. Obviously, the Commanders, a massive win on Monday Night Football as they go into Philadelphia and slay the Eagles, giving them their first loss of the year. There's been talk today out of Washington that Ron Rivera is not committing to a starting quarterback right now. Carson Wentz is supposed to be available coming off of his broken finger. And Taylor Heineke has just been outstanding. He has 1 loss in his starts as a Washington Commander starting quarterback this season, but he's covered the spread in all 4 games that he's played. Where I see it, the Commanders are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under set at 40.5 points. Some gambling trends for you before we go around and break it down. The Commanders are 4-0-1 against the spread in their last 5 games overall. The Texans are 2-6 against the spread versus a team with a losing record. The favorite is 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 meetings between the Commanders and Texans. The under is 6-2 in the Commanders' last 8 games overall, and the over is 5-2 in the Texans' last 7 home games. Adam, what are your thoughts on Commanders-Texans?
Well, I think Washington last night was just a more physical football team. Look like they wanted it more. They ran the ball pretty much right down Philly's throats. Robinson is just a beast back there. Houston, on the other side of the coin here, Houston had a tough game against the Giants. I think that game was a lot closer than what it finished up as. Mills actually did play a bad game, threw for 319 and a touchdown. Not a horrible game. Pierce obviously was okay. So this is an interesting football game with Washington traveling to Houston now as a favorite. Over the last 3 games, Washington has rushed for 128 yards a game. That's up from 112 that they were averaging, 20th in the league. So that's a big positive there. The rush defense for Houston has been struggling. They're 32nd in the league at 181. But they're actually worse the last 3 games. 216 yards they're averaging giving up on the ground. So that's a huge edge to Washington. Washington's rush defense, 12th in the league at 113. But the last 3, they've actually closed up to 95. So that bodes well for them too. So I think just defensively, they're playing a hell of a lot better. Heineke is just winning football games. We talked about it the last couple of weeks. Minnesota and Washington are 2 of these teams that just hang around. And even though Davis Mills played a little bit better than they have Pierce, I like what I'm seeing on this Washington defense. I like the fact that Heineke is a gamer, and that's a big game last night. That's not to be underestimated. Going into Philly and beating an 8-0 Eagles team, that's a big deal for Washington and Heineke. I just hope it's not a letdown spot going into Houston. But from what I've seen out of the defense and what I've seen out of Heineke, I like Washington in this game.
You kind of hit on the concern that's definitely keeping me from being all in on Washington, and that is the opportunity for a letdown game. Obviously, given that Washington gets the win on Monday night against a division opponent, and not only do you get the win and you get the celebration, but you have one less day to recover. And I think that absolutely plays a factor. That was a physical game. And for so many reasons, I have to believe that the Commanders don't have their focus on this game quite the same way that they did last week. So I am a bit concerned about this one. That said, one gambling trend that I mentioned really stands out to me. The Texans are 2-6 against the spread versus a team with a losing record. We've talked a lot this year about the Texans covering in the games that they've had, but they're usually covering against teams that are better than them. They're playing up to their competition. And what concerns me is in this game, they're playing a Washington Commanders team that's 5-5. So it's not a losing record, but it's also not a team that the Texans are getting up for in the same way they would against some of the other opponents that they've had this year. I think this is going to be a competitive game. I don't like 2.5. I think 2.5 is a bit of a trap. I want to buy that 1.5, get it to +4 and take the Texans. But I do like Washington on the money line. I just think they're a more talented roster. A big note for this game, Chase Young expected back. He returns after a year away with an ACL injury. So Chase Young, one of the best defensive ends in the NFL, making his return. I do expect him to have a sack in this game, so that might be a good player prop. I think he's healthy enough to actually be a factor in this, getting after Davis Mills. But because of where I am in terms of fear of a letdown, part of me wants to avoid this game. And a lot of the bets I actually made last night in piecing together my picks for not just this show, but putting in some early parlay plays. I avoided this game in a lot of them because I feel like it is a trap. I want to see where the public money comes down. You have to believe that the public's going to really like Washington, especially after what they saw in prime time on Monday night. So I'm leaning towards Houston, but I'm waiting to take it. I'm waiting until public money kind of pushes them even more in my favor. As for the over-under, I actually kind of like the over in this game. We've seen that when Taylor Heineke is on the field, the passing game of Washington is much more improved than it was in the first half of the year. And Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans, to me, he's the offensive rookie of the year. He's been absolutely outstanding, and I expect him to have a big game in this one as well. So I'm leaning towards the over. I'm going to buy that down, get it down to 39 points and take the over. But with this game as a whole, I'm kind of waiting again to see where the public money comes down. We talk about this on our early week show. There are opportunities on Tuesday to bet, and there are opportunities on Sunday to bet. If you don't like what you see on Tuesday, you don't have to force it. Wait. Tuesday is about seeing where there are opportunities before public money comes down or what Vegas is giving you that you can jump on. But you don't need to rush. You don't need to throw money around just because you see a sports bet. Wait, get more information on this one. There might be reasons to feel better about taking Houston to cover as the week goes on. Want to thank everyone who's joining us in Twitter Space, Blease, Adam, Carol, and everyone who's joining us on YouTube as we stream in our metaverse studio, Butt Fumble Sports, bringing the metaverse, bringing sports talk into the metaverse. And one thing we talk a lot about here on Butt Fumble Sports, we want to democratize sports media, allow the every fan to be on-air talent. If you have a take, a pick, a fantasy football play, share it with us. Tweet at Butt Fumble Sports. Share it with us on TikTok and Instagram at Butt Fumble Sports. On TikTok, on Twitter at Sports Fumble, at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and on YouTube. Appreciate everyone joining us. We hope you're having a great week, and we hope you're going to cash a lot of your tickets in the coming days. We move on to the next game in the 1 p.m. window as the Philadelphia Eagles, no longer undefeated. They are now 8-1, travel to Indianapolis. to play somehow the Colts that pulled off a miraculous win last week against the Las Vegas Raiders in Jeff Saturday's head coaching debut. The Colts are now 4-5-1. This game is on CBS. Where I see it, the Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 44.5 points. Some gambling trends for you before we go around and break it down. The Eagles are 5-2 against the spread in their last 7 games overall. The Colts are 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games following a straight-up win. The road team is 4-1 in the last 5 meetings between the Eagles and Colts. The over is 4-0 in the Eagles' last 4 games overall, and the over is 4-1 in the last 5 meetings between the Eagles and Colts. Adam, what are your thoughts on this game?
Well, it's an interesting football game. Philly coming off their first loss of the season. How do they respond to that? Indianapolis got that big win with the big coaching change with Saturday. How do they respond to that? With Ryan, obviously it's a different football team with Ryan at quarterback and or Foles. As long as Ellinger's not in there, this is definitely a different football team. I think what killed Philly last night was just turnovers. I mean, four turnovers was just brutal. And like I mentioned before, I think that Washington was just a more physical football team. I like Indianapolis in this game with their physical defense. The one thing that stood out to me in this game is the last 3, they've averaged 140 yards on the ground, and that's from 98.7, which is 28th in the league. Taylor's getting more carries. They're getting more confidence in him. He's getting more healthy. The last 3 games, he's went from 10 to 16 to 22 carries for 147 yards last week. So I think he's obviously a big key cog in this wheel. Saturday loves to run the football and control the clock. With Matt Ryan in there, you have to be a lot more confidence in that. And to that point as well, Philly's rush defense is 20th in the league, allowing 124.8. They got beat up on Monday night by a more physical team. So I'm leaning to Indianapolis with the points here at home for sure. It'll be interesting to see how Philly bounces back from his first loss of the season.
It's interesting that you're leaning towards Indianapolis. I'm not making the same move. I think that there are a couple of factors that are pushing me in that direction. One, Jeff Saturday did get a win last week against the Raiders. I thought that was a very emotional game. I thought that there was a lot of pride on the line for both Saturday and a number of his players. I wish I had known that Matt Ryan was going to play. I wasn't aware of that going into that game. I thought it was going to be Sam Ehlinger. If I had known it was Matt Ryan, I would have taken the Colts to cover because I like Ryan's veteran leadership, given that it's a young play caller and it's Jeff Saturday in this new role as head coach. So I actually think Matt Ryan being that kind of veteran, keep a steady hand, manage the game, I think that plays to the Colts' advantage. It's what I liked for that reason against the Raiders. That said, I think the Colts are going to face a Philadelphia team that's going to be pissed off. They not only played poorly and let themselves down, but there were a number of reasons to feel like if you're a Philadelphia Eagles player, that game got taken away from you. There were some bad calls. There were things that went against you. And I think Philadelphia is going to come back really focused. I think this is a really talented team. And I think you're going to see the leadership of Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts is going to speak to his team saying, if we lose this game against the Colts, if we have another poor performance, all of a sudden, we aren't the team everyone thought we were. We're going to backslide. I think you're going to see the Eagles come back way better. I think that the Colts right now, I agree with you, Adam, are going to focus heavily on Jonathan Taylor. To me, it's all about what can the Eagles do to be better against the run. They were not good last night against Robinson and Gibson. How do they address that over the next few days? I expect them to be much better. I expect them to have a refocused effort. I like the Eagles on the money line. I'll just say that. As for the points, right now 7.5 is a bit rich for me. I think the Eagles actually could cover that. I buy it down only under a touchdown. I'd get the Eagles at -6.5 because I like the Eagles winning by a touchdown rather. That said, if depending on how public money comes down, again, this is going to influence my bet because I like Indianapolis. If this gets up to where I can get it at Indy +10, if the spread moves and Philadelphia goes up to 8.5-point favorites, I'd buy the 1.5 and get the Colts +10. That said, if this shifts down, I'll take the Eagles. So either way, I feel like this is a good game to play on both sides of it. As for the over-under, I really don't like it. I like the under if I'm going to go in one direction because I think there's going to just be a lot of running in this game. I think this is going to be a heavy Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, Jonathan Taylor kind of game, a lot of ground action. That said, A.J. Brown really disappointed last night. Adam, is there any reason to believe that was an outlier, or is A.J. Brown a kind of a streaky player? He's had two massive games this year, but week in, week out, he hasn't been nearly as consistent as fans, fantasy, or player prop bettors would want him to be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think the expectation was big stage last night that he would have had his way with that Washington secondary, and he didn't. Devontae Smith had a pretty decent game, which obviously they've been waiting for him to kind of break out a little bit. He's been kind of in the shadows of A.J. Brown, but the last two games, Brown hasn't really done a whole lot. Like you're right, other than that Pittsburgh game where he had the big breakout game, he's been around that 30 to 60 yards receiving window. So, I think Devontae Smith have been waiting for him to kind of come up and arise a little bit, and he did that yesterday for some aspect of it. But this Colts pass defense is pretty good. So they're seventh in the league, allowing 196 yards a game. So I think they could focus on him and maybe see if Devontae Smith can do it 2 weeks in a row. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. But you're right. I think that A.J. Brown is definitely looking to have a better game here coming up, as the last two have been pretty lackluster.
Follow us on Twitter at Sports Fumble, at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Butt Fumble Sports, democratizing sports media, allowing every fan to be on-air talent. We want to hear your picks, your takes, your rants, your analysis. We love hearing from fans. We believe you know just as much as the people on sports television, and we want to prove it to the world. Moving to the next game in the 1 p.m. window, the 3-6 Detroit Lions play the 7-2 New York Giants. This game is on Fox. Where I see it, the Giants are a 3-point favorite. The over-under set at 46.5 points. Some gambling trends for you. The Lions are 5-2 against the spread versus a team with a winning record. The Giants are 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 games overall. The road team is 7-2 against the spread in the last 9 meetings between the Lions and Giants. The over is 8-3 in the Lions' last 11 games overall. And the under is 7-0 in the Giants' last 7 games versus a team with a losing road record. I'm going to jump in and take this one first. This game stands out to me as one in which, I'm sorry, I have to go against the Lions. I like Dan Campbell and the kneecap-biting Detroit Lions, but they've had a nice stretch of back-to-back wins for the first time in forever, and I can't possibly see them winning 3 games in a row. They have to go on the road to New York, and Brian Daboll and the New York Jets have been absolutely spectacular. All of their wins this year have come in games that have been in a single score difference. So with that said, they're playing competitive games and they're learning how to win. They're extremely talented up front on both sides of the ball. I love what I'm seeing from their offensive line. Saquon Barkley continues to dazzle. He had a big game against the Texans last week. Daniel Jones, we don't talk about him anymore, and that's a great thing. When Daniel Jones isn't being mentioned, it means he's doing all the right things, not turning the ball over, managing the game well. I like the Giants to cover. I'm going to buy the 1.5, get this down, get Giants -1.5. This could easily end up being one of my best bets of the week. Really like the Giants in this situation. I think the Lions could easily cover if I went the other way. If I bought the points, but +4.5, I think the Lions could cover that. But that said, where am I leaning in terms of my confidence level? It's on Giants -1.5. I feel really good about this game. Giants at home, especially after the Eagles lose. There's a window now open for the Giants to sneak into first place in the NFC East. They're making all the right progressions over the year. They're maturing. They don't have talented wide receivers, but they don't need it right now with this running game and the way they've been playing defense. I absolutely expect Jared Goff to throw a pick in this game, so that could easily be a player prop I put out later in the week. But Giants -1.5, this, like I said, could easily be one of my best bets of the week. Adam, what are your thoughts on Lions and Giants?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I like the Giants in this game. Coming off that bye this week against Houston, they were a little sluggish. Like I mentioned, that game was a little bit closer than what the score actually showed. But the Giants got it done. I mean, it just comes down to, you're almost a replay of what you just had against Chicago. I mean, you have a running team in the Giants. Detroit is obviously not a running team, more of a passing team. So just taking a look at that Giants deep or the Detroit defense, 27th in the league against the pass, 31st against the run. I mean, that's all you need to know. They're giving up 5.3 yards an attempt right now. That's 30th in the league, where the Giants are running 4.8 yards per attempt, which is 10th in the league, and they're third overall at 164.8. I mean, obviously, that offensive line and Barkley, I think they control this game. And on the flip side of that, Detroit just can't run the football. The last 3 games have only averaging 98 yards a game. And I think that this is a ball control offense for the Giants. I think Detroit goes a couple 3-and-outs or maybe one first down and out, keeps their defense on the field a lot longer than they should be. And all that does is play into the hands of the Giants, pounding the football down their throat. So I agree with you. I like the Giants. As far as the over-under, I don't have a feel for it. I probably have to lean towards the under because I think the Giants defense, albeit they did give up 300 yards to Davis Mills last week, I think that they probably could keep Detroit somewhere around 17 points or so. And I think the Giants, with the running control of the clock, will be in the 20s. So I think it'll be close to 46, but I would have a slight lean towards the under in that game.
Appreciate everyone following us on Twitter Spaces and everyone who's watching as we go live from the metaverse in spatial. Fumble Sports bringing sports talk into the metaverse. Appreciate all of you. Follow us on Twitter at SportsFumble, on Instagram and TikTok at Fumble Sports, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to move on to the next game in the 1 p.m. window. The 3-7 Carolina Panthers playing the 6-3 Baltimore Ravens. This game is on Fox. Where I saw it, Baltimore was a 13-point favorite. The over-under set at 43 points. Baker Mayfield will be the starting quarterback for Carolina in this game. Maybe one of the reasons the spread is as wide as it is. Some gambling notes for you before we go around and break it down. The Panthers are 1-7 against the spread in their last 8 road games. The Ravens are 0-4 and 1 against the spread in their last 5 home games. The over is 9-0 in the Panthers' last 9 games following a bye week. The under is 5-1 in the Ravens' last 6 games overall. And the over is 4-0 in the last 4 meetings between the Panthers and Ravens. Adam, I'll let you go first on this one. What do you think about Panthers-Ravens?
Looking at this game, I didn't spend too much time on it because with Mayfield starting, it's kind of like, where do you go from here, right? I mean, he obviously did not look good the last time we saw him, and then he was injured, and Walker came in, and now he's come back in. So it's really hard offensively to figure out what that is going to look like. You'd have to lean that it's probably not going to look that great. So just looking at this game, the one thing that stood out to me is the last 3 games, Carolina's rush defense is giving up 182 yards a game. They were already 25th in the league in doing that, but that's even worse. That's about 70 yards worse per game giving up on the ground. We obviously know Baltimore loves to run the football. They're second in the league in rushing at 168 yards, but the last 3, they're almost at 194 yards a game rushing. So to me, I'm looking at some player props in this game that, again, 12.5 is just a lot of points. I mean, I know Carolina, everything's pointing against them in this game. Going to Baltimore, Mayfield with a pretty bad defense in Carolina, but 2 touchdowns in the NFL these days is just so hard to lay that number. So I'm going to look at some rushing player props in this game and see where Lamar Jackson comes out because Carolina's run defense is so poor.
Baker Mayfield in his career against the Baltimore Ravens has a completion percentage of 58.4. He had averages 1.6 touchdowns per appearance and 1.1 interceptions per appearance. Obviously, doesn't put up big numbers against them and has struggled frequently against the Ravens defense. There are reasons I have to believe that's going to be the case once again this week. I love the addition of Roquan Smith. I thought that completely changed the Ravens season. Not only does it add leadership to the defense, but they're much better against the run now. For that reason, I'm not a fan of Chuba Hubbard and D'Onta Foreman in this game. I know D'Onta Foreman has been an absolute monster in fantasy and player props the last few weeks, but because of Roquan Smith and how the Ravens defense is getting better by the week against the run, I'm fading those running backs. And for that reason, I really don't like the Panthers in this game because it means they're going to have to rely on Baker Mayfield that much more. I really like the Ravens. They're coming off a bye week. They're going to be healthy. They're going to be focused. I lean towards the over in this game. I could absolutely see an interception or a fumble recovery going to the house. Put me down for a defensive score in this game. On the Baltimore side, I expect their defense to be the one getting the pick six. But that said, I'm with you, Adam. I feel like that spread is just shockingly high. I have to go against that. Whenever we've seen a spread of that size, the underdog has been a cashing bet more often than not. So if I have to go with a spread in this one, I would take Carolina. I'll buy the 1.5. That means I'm getting Carolina plus 14.5. That just seems stupid. I'm getting them by 2 touchdowns. This isn't college football. This is the NFL. That just seems like, a good bet. But I'm not going to do that on too many tickets. I will take Baltimore on the money line, folded it into some parlays. I think that's the better play. You're not going to really go to this game to really cash a lot of tickets unless you got the cojones to take a major spread like this. I'm not a big fan of it. So I lean towards Baltimore on the money line, fold them into some parlays. Adam, one question for you on player props. DJ Moore, do we like him more or less with Baker Mayfield now in the starting lineup?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's really hard to say. I mean, with Baker, I just don't know what you're going to get with him. He just looks so poor early on in the season. It's really hard to say. And I don't know if with, PJ Walker, if he developed a little bit more of a chemistry with DJ Moore. Moore's last couple of games hasn't really playing all that great in the 20s receiving yards. He had that big game against Atlanta, but other than that, he hasn't really done a whole lot. So honestly, it's really hard to say. I'm just really interested to see what Mayfield looks like. He's been sitting for a while now. I don't know if that's good or bad, but just the uncertainty around of what he's going to look like, especially like you mentioned against this Baltimore defense now with Raekwon Smith. It's just really hard to say. I'm not expecting much out of Mayfield in this game. I'm expecting to see what we saw earlier on in the year. So I would probably fade DJ Moore in the spot against this Baltimore defense and the unknown Mayfield.
The final game in the 1 p.m. window that we'll cover, the 3-6 Los Angeles Rams go up against the 3-7 New Orleans Saints. This game is on Fox. Where I see it, the Saints are a 3.5-point favorite, and the over-under is set at 39.5 points. The major news of the week in the NFL, Cooper Kupp put on the IR, high ankle sprain, will require surgery. I believe he's already had that surgery and on his way to recovery. But in so many ways, it really ends the Rams season. They go through the Super Bowl hangover season. Things have not gone well with Matthew Stafford. They've had a number of injuries on both sides of the ball. And now with Cooper Kupp gone, a lot of the shine is away from the Rams, and they just look like a much different team going into this game. Some gambling trends for you before we break this game down. The Rams are 2-8-1 against the spread in their last 11 games overall. The Saints are 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games overall. The home team is 8-1 against the spread in the last 9 meetings between the Rams and the Saints. The under is 4-0 in the Rams' last 4 road games, and the over is 5-2 in the last 7 meetings in New Orleans between the Rams and Saints. Adam, what are your thoughts on Los Angeles Rams versus New Orleans Saints?
Well, this is a tough one with Kupp being out and Stafford still in the concussion protocol. It's hard to say. The one stat you did say right there, though, 4-0 under away Rams games, and that's where I'd look to play in this game. I think if you take a look at this Rams defense, their rush yards per game, they're 4th in the league at rush yards per game. They're 69.7 they give up away from Los Angeles. In the last 3, they've only given up 80 per game. So that's pretty stout run defense. New Orleans rush offense is 15th in the league, but the last 3 games, they've only been averaging 71 yards a game. So that's a big strength with the Rams there. Put the ball in the hands of Andy Dalton. Now, the pass defense has gotten a little bit worse. The last 3 games, they've given up about 250 yards a game, but that rush defense is pretty strong. On the other side, obviously, the Rams have struggled running the football. They're worst in the league, 32nd. And the rush defense for New Orleans isn't that great either with 25th. But I think because the Rams are so poor running the football, they're 21st in the league in passing, but I don't know who you're going to get here playing at quarterback. New Orleans is 6th in the league against the pass. So to me, this game just spells under all over it. As far as the side, I would stay away from it. Just not so much uncertainty between Kupp and Stafford, but I really like the under in this game.
Couldn't agree with you more, Adam. Love the under in this game. Think this is a game between Matthew Stafford and Andy Dalton, and it doesn't feature Cooper Kupp or Michael Thomas. For so many reasons, I feel like the under is the play in this game. I really also like the Saints on the money line. One gambling trend that I mentioned a moment ago that really stood out to me, the home team is 8-1 against the spread in the last 9 meetings between the two teams. Given who's healthier, given the momentum of the season, given everything that we know, I like the Saints in this game. I know they laid an egg in Pittsburgh this past week. I expected that. I thought the Steelers were not only going to cover, but we're going to win that game. So I wasn't surprised. But we're back in New Orleans. We're back in the Superdome for so many reasons. You have to believe that the Saints playing in front of their fans is a great play, especially without Cooper Kupp on the opposing side of the field. Love the Saints in this one. I like the Saints on the money line. This is another one of my best bets of the week. I mentioned earlier the Giants covering is one of them. I really like the Saints in a money line play in this game. I also am with you, Adam. I love the under. As for the spread, I would even go as far as to take the Saints. I might even not buy the points. That's how crazy I'm being about this game. That said, I'm not going to be too shocking. But Fumble Sports, we love taking the points. And I'm going to buy the 1.5, get it down to Saints -2. I think that's one of the better bets of the week, playing in front of their home fans and obviously not having to cover Cooper Kupp. Appreciate everyone following us on Twitter Spaces at Sports Fumble and on TikTok and Instagram at Fumble Sports. We're streaming live in the metaverse from our metaverse studio, bringing sports talk into the metaverse. We move to the 4 p.m. slate of games. And the first one that we have for you is the Las Vegas Raiders, who will retain Josh McDaniels. He will be their head coach for this week, despite the calls from some Las Vegas Raider fans. The Raiders are 2-7. They travel to Mile High to play the 3-6 Denver Broncos. This game is on Fox. Denver is a 2.5-point favorite where I see it, and the over-under set at 41.5 points. Some gambling trends for you before we go around and break it down. The Raiders are 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 games overall. The Broncos are 4-9 against the spread in their last 13 games overall. The Raiders are 9-1 against the spread in their last 10 meetings against the Broncos. The under is 5-2 in the last 7 meetings in Denver, and the under is 4-0 in the Broncos' last 4 home games. Adam, what are your thoughts on this game between the Raiders and Broncos?
Well, this Las Vegas team is just a dumpster fire, let's be honest. I mean, Josh McDaniels losing last week to Saturday was just a mess. This offense right now is 12th in the league in passing and 24th in rushing, but the last 3 they've been 208 passing and only 62 yards on the ground rushing. That's terrible. And obviously Denver being the best defense in the league for the most part, number 1 against the pass, number 13th against the run. So I think strength, Denver for sure. Offensively, Denver obviously has struggled, only 15th in the pass and 25th against the rush. But this Raiders defense is just awful. They're allowing 250 yards per game through the air and 126 on the ground. And they give up 25.1 points a game, which is 28th in the league. So I think Denver -2.5. I don't like it. You know, obviously I'd much rather, Vegas here with this 41.5 total. I think it goes under. These Denver games have been going under the total as of late. And I think I would lay the 2.5 with Denver. I think there's just so much uncertainty in the locker room in Las Vegas. I think McDaniels has lost his locker room. I think Devontae Adams is mad. Derek Carr obviously has not been playing very good. So I think going to Denver, Denver has been just good defensively, bad offensively, but I think that's enough that they can cover this 2.5 number and go under the total against Vegas.
Okay, this is a matchup, good, bad, and ugly. The good in this game, Devontae Adams against Patrick Surtain II. That is going to be one of the best matchups of the week. One of the best wide receivers in the NFL against one of the best shutdown corners in the NFL. I would watch that matchup all day if they just stream that exclusively. As for the bad in this game, it's Josh McDaniels. To your point, Adam, he's completely lost this team. This was a team that was playoff caliber last year, made a number of additions in the offseason, and has done nothing but disappoint. And on the road, they have been a disaster this year. So if you thought Vegas was bad at home, they're even worse on the road. The ugly in this game, though, for me, is Derek Carr. Because Derek Carr's career is hanging in the balance week after week. And something that comes out of it for me is Mark Davis put his seal of approval behind and his endorsement behind Josh McDaniels today. When in facing the media, he said, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're going to get this thing under control, but Josh McDaniels is my guy. Okay, then who's the scapegoat? Not the general manager, not the head coach. It's the quarterback. Derek Carr, you're officially on the hot seat. So for me, this game is really about, can Derek Carr play better? Can Derek Carr start to save his job? In the past few years, Derek Carr actually has performed well under pressure. May not seem that way, but in the fourth quarter, late game drives, he's actually statistically been one of the better quarterbacks in the league. This is a moment he needs to rise to the same occasion like he has in years past, because it's all on the line for him. Major injury in this game for me, Jerry Jeudy being out for Denver. Russell Wilson doesn't have that many targets to go to. The running game isn't impressive for Denver. For a number of reasons, I think that just limits the dynamic, capabilities of that offense. I really like the under in this game. I would buy the 1.5, get it to 43 points, and take the under. As for the spread, the one trend that stood out to me that is just echoing back in my head, the Raiders are 9-1 against the spread in the last 10 meetings that they had against the Broncos. They've just played them well. I really want to take the Raiders to cover. I really want to do it, but I'm not. I'm not going to do it because it seems like a trap. So if public money comes down and really gives me an opportunity on the Raiders, I will take it as the week progresses. But for now, the play that I'm going towards is the under 43 points. Adam, I mentioned a moment ago the great matchup that we're going to see between Davante Adams and Patrick Surtain II. Do you think that as a player prop, under total receiving yards for Davante Adams is a good play this week?
Well, it's really hard to say against this tough Broncos defense, but I've watched Davante Adams enough to know that you can never bet against them. I would always take the over wherever he lies because he's such a game changer. Even when he catches a 5-6 yard pass, the moves he makes, he can take 5-6 and turn it into 16-17 really quickly. He's very elusive. He's very shifty, and he's a hell of a competitor. So even though the season's going down the train for Las Vegas, I definitely would lean to the over for Adams of any player prop that he has because he's just so talented.
Please hit us with some knowledge.
Yeah, I just got a couple comments here. Just want to give him a shout out for thank you for commenting. Liam Bacchus, he says, rate my team. 12-man half PPR. QBs, Herbert, Deshaun, running back, Christian McCaffrey, Zeke, Foreman. Wide receivers, Keenan, Hollywood, DJ, Rondale Moore, Juju. Tight end, Mark Andrews. And then Jose Lopez says...
Before you get to Lope, I'll just answer that first comment. I really like that team, except your wide receivers. You got a number of problems at the wide receiver position. Juju Smith-Schuster suffering that concussion. Don't expect him to be back this week. Like your running backs, like your quarterback, like your tight end, but you need to do something about that wide receiver position.
There you have it. Thank you. Just wanted to let them know we're paying attention. So,
and Blease, what you got from Lope?
7, need some running back help and need Mark Andrews, but solid all around.
Well, love to hear it. Appreciate those joining us on Twitter Space. Follow us on Twitter @SportsFumble. Of course, we put out content on all of our channels, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find us at ButtFumble Sports. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, ButtFumble Sports, democratizing sports media, turning every fan into on-air talent. We're going to go to our next game in the 4 p.m. window on Sunday. The 5-4 Cincinnati Bengals coming off a bye week play the 3-6 Pittsburgh Steelers coming off a win at home against the Saints. The Bengals are 4.5-point favorites where I see it. The over-under set at 41.5 points. Some gambling trends for you before we go around and break it down. Bengals are 8-2 against the spread in their last 10 road games. The Steelers are 5-1-1 against the spread in their last 7 home games. The under is 8-0-1 in the Bengals' last 9 versus the AFC. The under is 3-0-1 in the last 4 meetings in Pittsburgh between the Bengals and Steelers. And the under is 7-1 in the Steelers' last 8 home games. Adam, what are your thoughts on this one?
Tough division game at Pittsburgh for sure. This is an interesting one. Take a look at the numbers on this one. Burrow, the last 3 games, he's upped to 291 yards per game from 263. So that's definitely a good sign there. But obviously, Jamar Chase being out, he relies on Higgins and Boyd quite a bit. On the other side of the ball, Steelers are giving up 263 yards a game on average, but the last 3, they've closed it up a little bit to only 236. Rushing the football for the Steelers, 22nd league at 108, but the last 3, they've upped that to 152. So that's a huge gain, in my opinion. Cincinnati's 17th in the league against rush at 118. This is a really hard one for me, but a tough divisional game. I know Pittsburgh just came off that win at home against New Orleans. It's just really hard in a tough division game to take the favorite on the road with a 5-point spread. I think with the way that the Steelers had been running the ball, I think that it takes the pressure off of Pickett. As long as he doesn't make too many mistakes, I think this could be a 3-point game. So I would take Pittsburgh in the points in this one and lean towards the under.
I agree with you on the under, but as for the game, I like Cincinnati. The under is a great play because with TJ Watt back on the field, the Steelers' defense is just significantly better. Combine that with no Jamar Chase, I think both teams will be limited in their scoring, and I expect TJ Watt to have a strong game, limiting Joe Burrow slightly. But that said, the Steelers are a bad defense against the pass, even with TJ Watt. He'll control the points, but the yardage may be there. So I like T. Higgins and Boyd to get their yards, but I don't necessarily like points in this game. I do like Cincinnati on the money line. I feel really strongly about that. I think Pittsburgh got their home win. Keep in mind, the Bengals want some revenge. They lost at home week 1 against the Steelers in a crazy game that saw a lot of missed field goals from Evan McPherson. And for a lot of reasons, that kind of set the Bengals off on a bad track to the start of the season. I think they coming off a bye, they're focused, they're getting healthier. I really like the Bengals on the money line in this one. As for the spread, I'm leaning more towards the Steelers covering. I'd buy the 1.5 and get Steelers at +6, but I also like the Bengals at -3. I feel like this is going to be a 4-point game, 5-point game, so I kind of like playing it both ways. But if I had to put my conviction down behind one pick, it would be Cincinnati on the money line. That said, like I mentioned, Steelers to cover might be a nice play. Watch how the public money comes down throughout the week. I absolutely think that will make a difference. So be mindful of how the public plays it. This is an opportunity to get things early in the week. Now going to what could be the best game of NFL Week 11, the 6-3 Dallas Cowboys go to Minnesota to play the 8-1 Minnesota Vikings on CBS. Dallas, where I see it, is a 1-point favorite. The over-under set at 45.5 points. Both teams coming off pretty epic games. The Cowboys losing in overtime to the Packers. The Vikings winning in overtime against the Buffalo Bills. Some gambling trends for you before we go around and break it down. The Cowboys are 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 games following an against the spread loss. The Vikings are 3-0-1 against the spread in their last 4 games overall. The Cowboys are 2-5 against the spread in their last 7 meetings in Minnesota. The over is 3-1-1 in the Cowboys' last 5 road games, and the over is 7-1 in the Vikings' last 8 home games. Adam, what are your thoughts on Cowboys Vikings?
Yeah, you're right. This could be the game of the day. I mean, Dallas came off that deflating loss to Green Bay. Minnesota comes off an epic comeback against Buffalo. This is a really hard one to kind of pick. An open at 1, and then it's up to 1.5, so a little bit of money on Dallas in this one. The passing game for Dallas has gotten better over the last 3 games, from 198 to 231 as Dak's been back, so he's definitely improved there. The pass defense for Minnesota has improved the last 3 games by about 40 yards. They're allowing 244 a game, so they've gotten better in that area. Points per game allowed, Dallas has actually slipped from 18 to 22 points a game, so I have a slight lean towards the over. These Minnesota games have been scoring a lot of points. Just when, I guess my question is, I'm having a hard time picking a side in this game because when does Minnesota tire out? You know, they've been winning all these games, super tight games, 28-24, 28-25, 29-22, 24-16. These are hard-fought, tight games. 2017 against Washington, and of course, what happened to Buffalo. So when do they run out of steam? You know, is my question. Minnesota's a really hard place to go and play. As I mentioned, Dallas was just like Green Bay. They go home and they can travel to Minnesota. So I think the edge goes Minnesota in there. But I'm really having a hard time to pick a side here because I like to take Minnesota, but I'm just, when does the train slow down on the tracks with what they've been going through? Eventually, it's got to take its toll, I would think. So I'm going to probably decipher this game a little bit through the week, but I'm really having a hard time right now picking a side in this game. But I would give a slight lean to the over with both defenses giving up some points.
Love that analysis, Adam. Adam, you've been nailing it all show. Love the under 46 after I buy the 1.5. Feels like a great play to me. Minnesota at home, they definitely score. Cowboys, they know how to score. Dak is going to put up some points. I know the Dallas defense is good, but I feel good about Kirk Cousins in a one. I know it's a 4 p.m. game, so which Kirk Cousins are we getting? Is it Jekyll or Hyde, or is he in the middle of that metamorphosis, that transformation from good quarterback to bad quarterback? I don't know what happens in the 4 p.m. window. We know what he is at 1 p.m., and we know what he is in prime time, but 4 p.m., that might be a different story. That said, I do like Kirk Cousins at home, coming off that emotional win. That was a massive game for the Vikings, and I've mentioned it with some other teams. Where they are in the playoff standings really does make a difference in the mindset. The Minnesota Vikings, now that the Eagles have lost, are only a tiebreaker away from being able to out-edge the Eagles for the number 1 seed in the NFC. So the Vikings have a path to that bye week. Wouldn't that be amazing if the road to the Super Bowl went through Minnesota? I'm sure Viking fans can't believe it. I like the Vikings in this game on the money line. That's definitely where I'm considering placing my money. But my favorite bet of this game is the over. The two trends I mentioned, over is 3-1-1 in the Cowboys' last 5 road games. The over is 7-1 in the Vikings' last 8 home games. Those trends both validate my thinking, so I really like it. I'm going over 46 after I buy the 1.5. I am leaning towards Minnesota on the money line. Adam, you mentioned it. The travel going from Dallas to Green Bay, back to Dallas, back to Minnesota, that's just a lot in a 1-week span of time. And for a number of reasons, I actually think the Cowboys are in that midseason slide that we often expect them to have. I do think they'll reemerge later in the year and remain a playoff contender. But for this game, I'm leaning towards Minnesota on the money line. That is where my action is. But that said, as I mentioned, I'd probably make the over the best bet of this game. And now for the Sunday night football game, a matchup that was flexed into prime time. The 7-2 Kansas City Chiefs play the 5-4 Los Angeles Chargers. This game is on NBC. Kansas City is a 7-point favorite where I see it. The over-under set at 50 points. Some gambling trends for you. The Chiefs are 1-4 against the spread versus a team with a winning record. The Chargers are 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 games following a straight-up loss. The Chiefs are 8-1 against the spread in their last 9 meetings in Los Angeles. The over is 7-1 in the Chiefs' last 8 road games, and the over is 6-2 in the Chargers' last 8 home games. Adam, what are your thoughts on this AFC West divisional rivalry?
Well, again, a home dog in a tough division rivalry game. I have to lean to the Chargers here, catching the points at home. I know Kansas City is first in league in passing. The last 3, they've averaged 390 yards a game, which is quite remarkable. The pass defense for the Chargers actually got a little bit better over the last 3 games. They were giving up 209 yards a game, and now it's down to 178. So they have improved in that regard. The one thing that concerns me in this game is just the rushing offense for the Chargers. They're 30th in the league, but the last 3, they've only averaged 65 yards a game. And obviously, we know they have a lot of injuries on this team. So in a tough division game, the Chargers do have the offense that can score even amongst the injuries. And I know Kansas City's defense right now being 25th against the pass and 5th against the run, which that doesn't concern me too much because the Chargers can't run the football anyway. A tough division game at home. I like the points at home. I think the Kansas City will win money line, but I like the Chargers to cover the points here.
For me, with the Chargers, it's always about the health of their players. Is Keenan Allen going to play? Is Mike Williams going to play? What is the health of the offensive weapons around Justin Herbert? That said, I'm with you. I love the Chargers plus 8.5 after I buy the 1.5. I feel really good about that. Throughout this year, we've seen when divisional opponents play each other and the spread is 7 points or more, the underdog is a cashing ticket more often than not. Feel really good about the Chargers at home. I know this is going to feel like a Chiefs home game, given it's in LA. There are going to be way more Chiefs fans there. So probably the silent counter or a lot of false starts for the Chargers. But that said, I do like the Chargers to cover in this game. I think they put up plenty of points. I don't think that's the issue. I think for them, it is about the ability to stop Patrick Mahomes, get enough defensive plays to win this game or at least to cover. So for that reason, I like the Chargers to cover in this one. I like the Chiefs on the money line. As for the over-under, the 2 trends I brought up a moment ago, the over 7-1 in the Chiefs' last 8 road games, the over 6-2 in the Chargers' last 8 home games. There's a lot of reasons for me to believe in the over in this one. And right now, even though it is 50, I'm going to buy that 1.5, get it down to 48.5, and I will consider taking the over Obviously, the public money is going to favor that as well. So as the week goes on, expect that ceiling to go up. I'm not going to like it later in the week. It's one of the reasons we do these early betting line plays. I like 50 now, getting it down to 48.5. That feels like a great play on an early week bet. That said, as the week goes on, it's going to work against me. So once again, my bets, the Butt Fumble Sports bets for this game, the Chargers plus 8.5 after I buy a 1.5, Kansas City on the money line. And I like that over, but I like it early in the week when I get it at 48.5 after buying the 1.5. Appreciate everyone following us on Twitter Space, at Sports Fumble on Twitter. Follow us, follow our content at Butt Fumble Sports on Instagram, TikTok, and on YouTube. We're streaming live from the metaverse. Butt Fumble Sports brings sports talk into the metaverse. We want to democratize sports media, empower every fan to be on-air talent. Want to hear from you. Share your fantasy plays, player prop bets, picks, analysis, and all with us throughout the week. We love engaging with our fans. That said, we are going to go to the Monday Night Football game for NFL Week 11, the last game we're going to pick for this show. The 5-4 San Francisco 49ers travel to Arizona to play the 4-6 Cardinals. This game is on ESPN. Where I saw it, the 49ers were an 8-point favorite, and the over-under was set at 44 points. Some gambling notes for you. The 49ers are 15-4 against the spread in their last 19 Monday Night Football games. The underdog is 6-1-1 against the spread in the last 8 meetings between the two teams. The road team is 3-1-1 against the spread in the last 5 meetings between the 49ers and Cardinals. The under is 5-1 in the last 6 meetings between the two teams, and the under is 9-1 in the Cardinals' last 10 Monday night games. Adam, what are your thoughts on 49ers Cardinals?
Well, I didn't spend too much time looking at this one. Is Kyler Murray going to play or not? I think that's a big, yet to be seen if he's going to play or not. Now, this game's in Mexico, but I think San Francisco was so efficient on offense, 10th in the league in rushing, 14th in passing. Arizona really struggles against the pass, 23rd in the league. But the one thing that stands out for me in this game is that San Francisco is being efficient on offense, is 5th in the league in third down conversions. So I really like that. It keeps drives alive. It keeps Arizona on the field. I think McCaffrey, another and Deebo Samuel, 2 offensive guys that can move the football here. And defensively, San Francisco is 8th against the pass and 1st against the run. So much better defense, much efficient offense over Arizona. That being said, 7 points is still a lot of points in this game. So I lean San Francisco, but I need to know if Kyler Murray is going to be playing in this game or not.
Completely agree with you, and thank you for calling it out. Estadio Azteca will be the home for this game as both teams travel south of the border to play in Mexico City. Kyler Murray is the story of this game. Does he play? I really like Colt McCoy. I think he's a really reliable backup. You saw him win this past Sunday. But it's those kinds of games I feel good about him playing. It's not games against a dominant opponent like the 49ers, especially a 49ers defense that is as strong as it is, especially up front with Nick Bosa. For that reason, I do like the 49ers on the money line. That's the obvious play. 8 points is a lot. We talked about divisional opponents. When they're getting 7 points, that cash ticket goes to the underdog more often than not. So I'm going to buy the 1.5, and I will take Arizona at plus 9.5 and hope that Kyler Murray plays in this game. That's just a ticket or two that I'm going to place early in the week. As we get closer to Monday night, I will feel differently about it. I'll get more information about the status of Murray, and that'll obviously play into some of my bets that I make then. But the play I'm going to really make is San Francisco on the money line and fold that into a number of parlays. I feel really strong about that. The 49ers have such a strong roster. They're learning how to incorporate some of these new pieces. I feel good about the 49ers making a second half season surge for that reason alone. I like the 49ers on the money line in this one. I am leaning towards the under 45.5 points after I buy the 1.5 to raise that ceiling. Just going off of the trends I mentioned a moment ago, the under 9-1 in the Cardinals' last 10 Monday night games. For that reason, I'm leaning towards the under. I also think whether Kyler Murray's healthy or not, the Cardinals' offense won't be nearly as dynamic. James Conner, the running back of the Cardinals, goes up against arguably one of the best defenses against the run in the NFL in the 49ers. So for that reason, I like the under in this play, in this game. I like the 49ers on the money line, but I'm watching that spread to see if there's an opportunity to take the Cardinals. Appreciate everyone that's been joining us throughout the show. We love doing this. We love talking sports. Follow us on Twitter at SportsFumble, on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at ButtFumbleSports. ButtFumbleSports, democratizing sports media and bringing the every fan and putting them on air. Adam, great job in the show today. So appreciate your picks, your analysis, and everything that you do to make this show better. Look forward to talking to you on Sunday, hopefully, and getting your opinions as we head towards NFL Week 11. Amazing to think that we're already to NFL Week 11. Appreciate everyone who's been watching us on YouTube, in Spatial, Butt Fumble Sports, bringing sports talk into the metaverse. We hope everyone has fun this week, has some successful cash tickets, has some fantasy plays worth making. Rooting for all of you. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you Sunday morning at 10:30 on the in the metaverse and on Twitter Space as we broadcast our NFL Week 11 pregame show. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.